All right, and we are back again for another remote work chat. Hello, everyone, and I just want to go right ahead on into it. Excuse me. Oh my goodness, my voice. This is Erin. Erin, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. This is Erin Barrio. I'm really happy to be joining you guys today. I am the founder of Cushy Blog. We are a digital community and blog site. I'm also a co-podcaster on Accio Politics. We're a Harry Potter podcast talking about politics in the wizarding world. And during the day, I'm a communications manager at a venture capital firm called the Verge Fund, headquartered here in downtown Albuquerque.
Absolutely, and that's where you're at right now with this amazing background that you have.
That is, yes, the historic J.S. Brown building. It used to be a 1930s mercantile shop, but now it's part of the entrepreneurial ecosystem and sort of like the downtown hub where you got all these startups and the tech scene and a lot of entrepreneurial activity. So yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
Excellent. So can you tell us a little bit about, this aspect of your job where you do actually have a physical location to be at, but you work remotely with a lot of different people, I'm sure. Can you describe a little bit about what your weekly or monthly experience is like?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of working remotely, I kind of function in two ways. At my day job, I'm obviously, here in a brick and mortar right now, but what is nice is that I can work remotely and, I am a direct report to someone else here at the fund. And so in terms of how we work together, because he also has that flexibility, we utilize a lot of the same tools that I use when I'm managing my teams who work remotely for Cushy and Accio Politics, and that's Slack, Trello, and
Yeah.
the G Suite, specifically Drive for document sharing and storing. Um, and, particularly when we're talking about the blog site Cushy, the people that I work with and that I manage, they're across the United States. They're in Portland, they're in Atlanta, they're in Texas. So we are spread out, not even being just working remotely within the same city, but working remotely and spread out across geographic locations. So having tools like Slack, like Trello, where you can kind of like synthesize your workflow across platforms has been really, really helpful.
Are there any specific aspects of those tools that you feel is a unique setup for you?
A unique setup for us. So that's an interesting question, actually. I think, sort of on the more professional spectrum, when I'm talking about the fund, the VC firm, definitely, definitely platforms like Slack serve us really well because sometimes you don't have your phone by you, but you have that instant chat messaging pop up for you on your desktop, and that enables us to have a quicker workflow. But I think for Cushy and Accio Politics, something that's kind of unique about us in our toolkit and in how we communicate
Mhm.
is we'll utilize like Snapchat private group messages a
Wow.
lot. And we like that because it has this sort of social component,
Hmm.
but also like the immediacy of getting something across, like Slack or even Trello. But yeah, I think I'd have to think a little bit more on how we might use those other platforms in a unique sense, but they're certainly, like I said, they've been majorly helpful in our efficacy.
So I see a lot of people that love Slack, right? And if you are at all in any kind of company, honestly, you should be using Slack, hands down, or a platform that is similar to it. But one of the things that is a constant like push against using platforms like that is that it can actually take up more space, more time, more distractions. So, how do you have Slack set up in a way that helps to kind of prevent against some of those aspects of being a distraction instead of actually being a working tool?
Well, and I'll speak specifically to Cushy for this. It's by having sort of one channel as opposed to sub channels. I think Slack is unique in the way that it allows you to tailor the platform for your needs.
Yeah.
Um, but it also can get kind of like a Russian nesting doll, where you have maybe like one over encompassing team chat, but then within that you have smaller chats that you kind of have to continue to manage. So I think delineating what you use each platform for. So if you need like a quick answer and you're trying to address a large group, go to the Slack channel. If you need an individuated answer or you need to talk at length, consider using email or even picking up the phone and making the call.
Absolutely. So how do you, I mean, when we're using all these different modes of communication, all these different ways that we can actually speak to each other, have you clearly defined within any of these other aspects, like the speed of response, the type of conversations that are held within these platforms, and why you would have a direct message compared to it being, even if it's directed at a certain person, maybe having an open conversation about a particular subject. Talk a little bit about the different platforms and why you would use those particular pieces.
That's a really interesting question, Charles. And I think, to a large degree, it's a really interesting 21st century problem.
Yeah.
And for the most part, we've kind of navigated it non-verbally, meaning we're kind of using our intuition as millennials to figure out, again, non-verbally, which platform suits our needs best. And so it's kind of been this unspoken thing where it's like, okay, well, I really need a response on this. I'm going to text Erin, or this is something I need to get across a large group of people at the founder level, and I need an answer quickly. I'm going to use Slack. Or, I need to make an introduction to someone, and I'd like for them to, kind of feel like the social presence of Cushy and what that digital community feels like. I'm going to message them on Facebook Messenger. So I think it's largely, in our case, been intuitive, but your question makes me think that it might be worthwhile to have some kind of guideline delineating some of those things. Because certainly, depending on, like you were saying earlier, Slack can get to be, it can almost slow you down in certain instances, because
Right.
you may have sort of like all these open channels of communication, text, email, Slack, and it's like overload. So I think that that's kind of an interesting thing to think about in terms of a best practice.
One of the things that I've been kind of just really focusing on lately is this idea of focused work. And I don't know if there's anything that you do with these times and when you are focusing on the aspects of your job that are remote, where you don't have other people around you. How do you stay focused when you don't necessarily have that office space where it tells everybody, because I'm sitting in this chair at this desk with my laptop open at my computer, doing work. How do you kind of put constraints on yourself on when work time is, and kind of taking away some of those other distractions, as well as having this little bit more balance and having a life outside of it?
Well, I think, there's a couple of different ways to approach that question. I think first, I would speak personally and just say that, my personality type, I'm a self-starter. I am, someone who, will take initiative, and, if something needs to get done, I'll get it done. And I've kind of always, before I was doing what I'm doing now, I was a professor at New Mexico State University teaching English. And it's not at all that is necessarily like a remote job, but it's a lonely job in that, when you're a teacher or a professor, you're not necessarily being micromanaged. And so you kind of have to put those boundaries and those structures in place for yourself. But I would say that for my team, we maintain focus by having really clear deadlines and expectations that we communicate through on sort of like a weekly and monthly basis. One thing that has been really great for us is having like a hierarchy and having a really clear org chart. So knowing, if there's a deadline or an expectation coming up that you can't meet or need to negotiate around, who it is that you need to talk to about that. And if they can't help you, then who's the next person up. So I think just, having clear deadlines, clear expectations has really helped with focus, because I feel like working remotely, as opposed to having sort of like this typified 8 to 5, there's your chair, I know where to find you, remove some of those constraints. Because I have found that, often I am more productive when I am out of office, if I'm talking about, my day job, because I'm not getting caught up in any of the minutia, and by minutia, I mean, conversations that happen in the workplace, or, getting up for that third cup of coffee that I don't need, or, when I'm working remotely, I'm sort of able to intuitively work at the times that feel right, and with clear guidelines and expectations and deadlines, I know how to parcel that work out. It's certainly not perfect. It's like you said, it's this like work-life balance is always something but it's iterative, and I think seeking perfection is the goal, not having perfection. So
I'm right there with you. I think that it's this constant. I say struggle, but it really is just a
a
bending
dance.
of one way or another to be able to figure out what balance is. And the way that I guess I've always looked at it is, well, not always, but over the past few years, I've kind of discovered the best way to look at balance is not necessarily like everything has to have equal parts, but everything does have its time, right? So there's going to be
I love
times
that.
where work has a much higher value right now than unfortunately having some of these personal relationships and being out all the time, or having some family time. And there's other times that work is going to go on the back burner, and I'm going to spend more time focusing on family, focusing on having these other outside connections besides the professional relationships that I have. So it's always this balance in between, and going back and forth and realizing when you do need to make that shift and you've been in one way too much. So, I think it's been the easiest way that I've found that to at least justify the times in which I am 100% on work or 100% on something else, right? And just
I love
gives
that.
myself permission. Yeah.
I love that. You could embroider that on a pillow, totally. I think that's a great
Yes.
mantra to have. Yeah, definitely. And I like that too, because it can never be equitable, right? I mean, you could never really give yourself equal parts time for self-care and work and family. They do kind of have to be fluid in how you parcel out time for them. But yeah, I like that point a lot, Charles. I like that a lot.
And I think again, being remote, you have the ability to make those kinds of decisions, and I think that we just need to again give ourselves permission to be able to say, today I'm going to work from 6 o'clock at night to midnight, and these are my working hours, right? Just because it's fitting in with everything else that's going on. So alongside those lines, we did touch on this a little bit about working remotely as not necessarily you have to work in these specific times and these specific sets of parameters anymore, and that this kind of structure that we've built into our society now is allowing us to focus more on results oriented tasks instead of it being hourly oriented. Like, this task should take you approximately this long, and this is exactly the time that I want you to be working on it. How do you feel that has manipulated the way that you are working with other people, so that you don't have these expectations of, well, you're going to be doing this from this time to this time, and how do you, I guess, negotiate that with the people that you're working with?
Yeah, well, one thing that we did that is kind of unique to us when we first started, and we kind of are trying to employ this now as we are growing and getting new contributors for Cushy. I had my founders and my senior editor team complete a personality test. It's like a 16 personalities type quiz, and
Mm-hmm.
they submitted the results to me, and it told me about how they work and what they value, and kind of gave me insight into what to expect from them as people. And that was really interesting because I think when you think about the homogenized model of the 8 to 5 and the brick and mortar, there's this argument that because you are in a known place at a known time, you will be more productive because your whole focus is on those tasks, when in fact you could be filling that time with a lot of busyness or things that it's like you were saying earlier about maybe I'm going to work from 6 to midnight tonight because maybe I work best at night. Maybe I'm a night owl, and maybe I'm also a procrastinator. So during the day, it's not going to get done. So
Yeah.
knowing those things about them before we began working together was
Hmm.
huge.
Right.
And again, I keep bringing it back to having clear expectations and deadlines. I don't care when you get it done or how you get it done, so long as it's to me by Friday at 5, and if it's not, communicate with me early and frequently on why it can't be, and we'll negotiate a new deadline. But yeah, I think having that free flowing fluidity to determine how your day is going to be, and when that work fits into it and how you can best get it done, and calling those shots, it hasn't just served me well as a business owner, but it's served the people who are working for me really well too.
How do you manage workload when it's not tied so much to the hours spent, but the again the productivity, right? So how do you know that you are not giving someone too much, or the fact that you maybe can add onto someone else's workload?
Communication, definitely. Something that we do, because we are working remotely, is we do pretty frequently check in with each other. We are, for Cushy and for Akia Politics, we're an all female staff, and so checking in can be something formal that we do via an email, or it can be something very informal that we do via a text. And it's checking in not just on the workload or the work day, but on the person and the person themselves. And that's kind of a feminist approach that we employ in our practices. And again, we are a tight-knit community. We've done these sort of
Mhm.
personality tests, and we
Yeah.
exist on, Snap groups, and we have a private Facebook page. And so we all feel very comfortable, I think, also communicating with one another, voicing concerns. If I'll give you an example. One of my senior editors for Cushy Web, she's leaving to travel abroad for the month of May. And she
Okay.
and I have been working since January to alleviate her responsibilities for that month, distribute them
Mhm.
out amongst the rest of the community so that she can enjoy that time. But so we still know that those tasks are going to get done. So organization, forward thinking, communication, I think those are the ways that you can really make your remote team work really well and high functioning.
What is that personality test? I'm curious if we could drop a link or something like
Yeah,
that.
I would love. I can totally send you guys a link. It's called 16 Personalities. It was a test
Interesting.
that was available on Facebook. I can try to look it up
Nice.
now, or I can send it to you
Send
in
it
an
to me
email.
later. That's fine. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, yeah. But it's really interesting. I, for example, am a commander personality type. People in my category would be Steve Jobs is an example of another commander personality type.
Hmm.
Um, and what that taught me about myself as a leader is that I can be a little controlling. I might have the tendency to make demands without asking how they can be met or why they should be met. And
Mm.
so learning a little bit more about my own leadership style has also influenced how I work with others, and just trying to keep that in the back of my mind too. Like, my approach to action may not be everyone else's approach to action, and it's worthy of my time to consider those other perspectives.
Just the awareness, especially being part of a remote team, I think is paramount to working effectively together. Because if you don't have that kind of awareness of how those people, again, because you're giving them more freedom by not being in an office where you can't just stop out
Right.
by, you can't have that FaceTime without
Right.
literally picking up a phone or going on a screen and having that video kind of conversation, right? You can't, it just
Right.
doesn't happen serendipitously. So you have to be extremely intentional about having those kind of conversations about their needs and how they most effectively like to work, communicate. And so going back to those check-ins, what does that conversation look like when you have a check-in? Are you just going over a list of tasks, or what does that conversation look like?
So it's highly subjective and it depends on the person, and that may not be the answer that everyone wants to hear. I think
Yeah, yeah,
in terms of when we're talking about efficiencies, having kind of like subjective approaches to each person on your team may seem like, okay, that's crazy, but in fact it's not. And in fact it's quite manageable if you are truly interested and invested on maintaining and sustaining authentic relationships with your team. Um, you know, some of my some of the personality types on my team, they are um, they're more blunt, they're more dry. They don't like a lot of flowery language. They would just like to know, you know, what it is that I need and when I need it. Others prefer to have, more of a conversation and have it be a little bit less about work, or maybe talk about the personal first and then get to work.
yeah.
But again, the check-ins can take many forms. If it's informal and it's just, a quick, hey, how's it going? We'll just do that via text. But our Facebook private group and our Snapchat groups have proven to be just a great way to do that, because if we're not talking about something work related, my editor-in-chief for web, Liz Havey, she's great about, in fact, just kind of going onto that Facebook page and being like, hey, it's the first month of March. How's everyone doing? How are you feeling? What's going on in your life? And that comment thread will just blow up, and people take, I think, solace in the fact that they can have this safe space to vent, and also try to learn from each other too, in terms of skill sets and ways of doing things. So yeah, we're constantly learning from each other at Cushy. It's good. It's totally good.
And I think you bring up a really important aspect of being remote is that you need to build spaces that you can have non-work related conversations, right? Because the
Absolutely.
relationships in between whoever within the company, because you're not in person, again, you have to be intentional about, like, here's a space where we could just feel free to talk about the day-to-day, life, what's going on, and the movie that we saw, and our kids, or whatever the situation is, right? You need to have those spaces built into your business, so that you can just not have just cogs in a wheel working away at some other remote location, right? It's
Absolutely.
not like a factory that you just, like, I hire this person and they pull the lever, right? And then this thing is put out on the other side, right? It's not just about that. Everyone is still a person and wants to know that what they are as a person outside of what they give to you as a function in your business is meaningful.
That's beautifully put, because you would have those spaces naturally built into an office space, right? I mean, it would be the kitchen, it would be the coffee, it would be wherever, people kind of convene to have those conversations. And, something that you had talked about at the very beginning of this webinar was, how do you keep focus? I think just because you're working remotely doesn't mean that sort of like the mission or values of your business or organization should be in any way diminished or like less felt by your staff. So whatever your core values are, whatever the why is for what you're doing, that has to be heavily felt, and communicated and emphasized to the team frequently, so that they can kind of always remember why it is that they're doing what they're doing. And I think if you have people who believe what you believe and they're engaged with your mission and why you're doing what you're doing, again, it takes away some of that apprehension with having remote work in the first place.
So let's talk about the physical spaces that we have to be in when we are working remotely. How do you intentionally, or maybe not intentionally, design the place where you're actually sitting down and doing work?
Yeah, so I come from an education background. Both of my degrees are in English, and there's not a lot of structure around that field. And so
Yeah.
when I would work sort of in my undergrad and graduate degree, I
Mm-hmm.
would have everything on the floor. Like, I was definitely like a sit on the floor, cross-legged, have all of my materials in front of me kind of person. And that hasn't changed, and that is what I love about working home, regardless of what entity it is that I'm working for. There is something about having stretchy pants on that just lets my mind fly. I mean, it's like uninhibited thoughts and productivity. The looser the waistband, the better I work. And when I'm at home, I really enjoy having the ability to spread out. I'm a visual thinker and learner, so I
Yeah.
love being able to see all the pieces of my puzzle in front of me,
Mm.
and kind of tangibly able to touch those things. And if I feel free in my body, I'm going to feel free in my work. And I think that's one of the big things about remote working too. Is it's not just you are sitting here in this space, but it's also what are you wearing in that space. And I love to get dressed up, but business casual is constrictive, and it's constrictive to my spirit and to my thought process and to my decision making landscape. So yeah, when I'm working at home, it's yoga pants. I'm
Yeah.
streaming Buffy on the background. I've watched it so many
So,
times that I don't even need to watch the show. I already know the lines by heart, and it's just great to have on in the background. Um,
mhm.
but yeah, can you relate to that at all in terms of bodily spaces and how because when you're at home, you're a lot different in how your body's kind of functioning than when you're at work or even at a coffee shop.
Well, the idea that you need to build a space that that is like this means work, right? And this means I'm going to be focusing on work. And you brought up a couple different aspects that I thought was really interesting. Is one is that even though we're in such a digital age, you still like the tangible, the touching, this is what this means, and it's even if it's just written words on paper instead of some sort of machine that you're putting together. This idea of being able to grasp something and turn through it. That's why I love books, but I do buy both digital and paperback or hardback
Same.
books because
Yeah.
it's great to be able to have that tangible aspect. But then I also do love the portability of just being able to pick up my phone and go right back into something that I started on my iPad or started on
Yeah.
reading online
Yeah.
somewhere, right? So I don't know if you can see behind me. I actually have three different whiteboards. This one is actually freestanding, so I could just walk around with it. The other two are
Nice.
permanently attached to my wall. And I love, again, even though I take notes and love Google Docs and love that recorded again, can start it here, pick it up somewhere else on my phone or whatever I need to do. Most of my work actually starts up on an idea on the whiteboard because I write in cursive. So being able
Yeah.
to tangibly take that pen and then sometimes I just like am at glee with myself with sometimes how well I write. So,
It's a
in
beautiful thing.
in
It's a
this
beautiful
tip,
thing.
it's and so it just feels good. And beyond that, there actually is lots of evidence to actually point to how we don't connect as much to the words that we're typing because the mechanics of pressing a button is entirely different in your brain, the way that it's wired compared to the uh, the aspect of fully having to write out a letter compared to just a click. Like it doesn't activate the same parts of the brain. So I love working in spaces like this, and I still have I love all kinds of stationery. And I got into a
Yeah.
conversation at a bar last night with a guy about pens. Like that's how much I love stationery and like having a good pen and the way that it writes and just
Yeah.
just all these different aspects of the physical world that we are can be replicated digitally, but doesn't have as much meaning and you don't connect to it as much. So I absolutely agree with you there.
Yeah, no, totally. And I'll share with you, I'm a lefty, and so when I
Oh,
write, I actually have at the end of the day always, like smudges and dark spots on the back of my hand, and it's when I'm washing my hands at the end of the day. I wash them throughout the day, but in particular this
right.
hand wash, at the
Yes.
end of the day, I'll see that, and it'll always trigger like, oh, well, did I write that down earlier, or did I get that on my
Mm.
list, or did I schedule that? So I completely agree. I think for some things, having that digital fluidity is great, but nothing for me personally will replace like that tangible pen to paper and how that helps me commit to memory more.
One of my friends, when she is extremely adamant about doing a very particular task, she actually writes the task on her hand right here. So it is like literally in front of her all the time until she gets the task done, and then we'll take it off. But we'll just like make sure that like that pen said skin is even
That's a
that
great
important.
idea.
Yeah.
No, I love that. I love that. And again, this idea too of sort of like handwriting things,
Mm,
that comes back to engagement and communication and check-ins for us at Cushy Chew. Something that we do that is pretty unique to us is we do a lot of snail mail. We will
really?
send cards, we will send care packages, we send stickers,
Great.
we send zines. We are constantly sending things to our people to have that reminder of, hey, I'm thinking about you. You're valued. Thank you for the work that you do. This made me think of you. And it goes so much farther than a text or a snap pic or, an email. Having that handwritten note, I think is just a reminder of their value and that we're thinking of them.
As much as we are digitalizing and simplifying and making things easier to do, it really is still those things that where you take the effort, where it's that extra step that is becoming more rare and extremely meaningful when you do get that care package in the mail, or you get that note card or whatever it is. And there is something about getting mail that you like that isn't a bill, right?
Oh, yeah, totally. And
Yeah.
that's actually an interesting line of conversation I would love to have you pick up on is, in this digital era, how do you create and maintain genuine communities when you're working in a digital group, when you're working remotely, when you have a cyber community. And this is a line of conversation that a lot of people are thinking about. I had to think about it a lot when I taught online. It was like, okay, it's time for group discussion. We're talking about a particularly heavy text and no one can see each other's faces. So how do
Right.
we engage each other in an authentic fashion, over this platform? That'd be a really interesting topic that I would love to hear from more people on.
I agree. And you know what? I will have you back. We as a group of people, and we in the Royals. So Erin, this was awesome. I know we're just at the end of our time now. So is there anything that you absolutely want to make sure that you give away as a tip, or a like if you were to talk to somebody about either they're being a remote worker or they own a business that hires and employs remote workers, is there anything that you feel that they need to know?
Yeah, take the time to develop an actual relationship. Don't just rely on email. Pick up the phone, give them a call, try to do what you can to personalize that relationship. It will go a long way in establishing trust, loyalty, and an expectation for work ethic. And communicate frequently. Yeah, don't make assumptions. Communicate. If you have a question or you're not sure, just ask.
Love it. Build relationships and communicate frequently. All right, guys. Well, it was so fun. Thank you so much, Erin, again for being here. I'm sure that
Thank you.
you will be back again and again and again. We'll have all sorts of fun conversations about this extremely new and fun world that we're building around us. I love it.
I hope so. Yeah, I'd love to. And thank you, Charles. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. We'll see you guys later. And recorded ended.